Good evening. This is Flash News, the newest event from Polish perspective. As every day we kick off right now. What we start? Well, the Presidential Harvest Festival was held in Poland. Farmers showed their gratitude for this year's crops. This time, the celebrations were organized not only less festive and also in the capital of Poland.
For farmers, it is one of the most important holidays. This year, exceptionally, the parade walked down the streets of Warsaw. It is also a presidential tradition to thank farmers for their efforts. The participants of the ceremony took part in a mass together with the presidential couple, where the harvest, wreaths and baskets were consecrated. The Harvest Festival is an excellent opportunity to thank the farmers for their hard work in farming. We all benefit from the work of farmers, from the fruits of the earth for which we are thankful today. This year's holiday is special because of the pandemic. President Andrzej Duda thanked the farmers for their hard work in difficult conditions. Our society as a whole has become convinced how important the work of farmers is. It turned out that every day these shelves were filled in the stores, that the goods are there, that the farmers delivered them to us in time, and finally that there is no shortage of bread for anyone, that there is no shortage of other food for anyone as well. The first Harvest Festival in Spała took place in 1927. The tradition was interrupted by the outbreak of war, and the festival was reactivated in the year 2000.
After the record number from Saturday, the new number of cases is climbing down. 910 new coronavirus infections were reported in Poland. In almost all European countries, the numbers are sky high now.
910 new cases of coronavirus infections and 11 victims. This is the latest data on coronavirus in Poland. We knew that unfortunately these new cases will be coming to us as well as in the whole of Europe, so this is mainly due to the fact that we came back from vacations and started to go to work. There are new yellow and red zones in the country. The restrictions related to the increase of the disease are valid in 11 counties. In 3 of the counties of Bytów, Kluczbork and Milicz, it is obligatory to wear masks in public spaces. Nobody will be hurt for those 5 to 10 minutes while entering the store and wearing a mask. Polish doctors call for keeping a distance, disinfecting hands and covering nose and mouth. But the most frightening fact are the latest data from Europe and the world.
And so it is. The epidemic situation in the world is getting worse with every day. Over 30 million people have already been diagnosed with the coronavirus. The number of victims is approaching 1 million now. Further countries are setting new records, with India, Brazil, and United States being in the lead. As long as there are no admitted vaccines, the only form of defense are still sanitary restrictions.
There are already over 200,000 victims of the COVID-19 in the United States. The number is expected to double by January. The worst epidemic situation is currently in Texas, California and Florida. Experts predict that a new wave of infections will occur in winter. They report that more and more Americans are not complying with sanitary orders. Since the announcement of the pandemic last February, more than 1.5 million tests have been conducted in Mexico. Nearly half of them proved to be positive. COVID-19 is already the 4th case of deaths in Mexico, followed by heart disease, diabetes and cancer. Mexico is the 7th country with the highest number of infections and the 4th with the highest number of deaths, behind the United States, Brazil and India. People will have to pay a fine of even £10,000 for breaking the isolation rules in the UK. The new rules for the second wave of the epidemic will come into force on the 28th of September. Almost 4,000 new infections were confirmed in the UK during the last day. The infection numbers from Friday and Saturday were the highest since the 8th of May. Spain is introducing restrictions on movement and limitations on gatherings in parts of the Madrid agglomeration. More than 850,000 people live there. Restrictions are necessary because of the rapidly increasing number of infected people and the limited number of places in hospitals in the region. Tragic results also in France. Over 10,500 new coronavirus infections were detected during the last 24 hours. Since August, France has been facing a second wave of infections larger than the one that hit the country in spring. Fortunately, the number of deaths is much lower than in the peak of the pandemic.
We stay abroad, looking east. The army and riot police on the streets of Minsk. The Belarusian regime declared the March of Justice, organized every Sunday, as illegal now. Even before the beginning of this protest, the first arrest already took place. OMON still brutally suppresses demonstrations throughout the whole country.
Only cowards beat women. The Belarusian regime increasingly often focuses its ruthless actions on women. Here you can see how the police brutally detained a pregnant woman in Grodno. According to the independent Belarusian media, more than 300 women were detained only on Saturday and only in Minsk. Among them is the legend of the Belarusian opposition, the 73-year-old Nina Baginskaya. I am protesting not to lose everything I have been fighting for the last 30 years of my political activity, since we fought for a change, for freedom in the 80s. I protest so that I can sleep peacefully. Protests against Alexander Lukashenko's regime are increasingly being suppressed by masked men. No uniforms and no police badges are visible. You know perfectly well that I am a police officer, you know that? No, I don't. This way, a not-uniformed police officer intervened in Grodno without any reason. This is how protests in Brest were suppressed with gas. From the morning hours in Minsk, the police riot forces and the army were preparing for the protest that Svetlana Tikhanovskaya called for. Armored carriers, prisoners and trucks armed with water cannons took to the streets. Thousands of protesters on the other side. We want something new. We lived in the old system for many years and nothing good happened to us. Now this is the time for changes. Even before the beginning of the March of Justice, the first arrests took place.
Asia now. Several tens of thousands of people took part in anti-government protests in Bangkok, Thailand. The Thais are demanding the resignation of the government and new democratic reforms in the country, shouting together, "Down with dictatorship, long live democracy." In response, authorities sent over 10,000 police officers to the streets.
I think that the 10 demands for the monarchy reform are heading towards a clear direction. It is about being able to speak about things that we were not able to speak in the past. A true democracy means that no power alone could stay above us. We can't be afraid. If we are afraid, then that means that we are suppressed by some sort of power. The list of demands includes the resignation of a government closely related to the army, the holding of new elections and political reforms, including the reduction of the king's role and the easing of the laws regarding the criticism of the majesty. Any criticism of members of the royal family in Thailand is punishable by up to 15 years in prison. As part of the protests near the Great Royal Palace in Bangkok, the Thais installed a plaque with the bold inscription, "Thailand belongs to the people." According to the protest organizers, up to 50,000 people took part in the demonstrations. According to experts, this is the largest anti-governmental assembly in years.
3 people dead and 1 declared as missing. This is Greece being battered by cyclone Yanos. The water washed away buildings and electric lines, flooded roads, fields and farms, and even destroyed bridges.
Downtown, the situation is hellish. Cars are upside down, flood everywhere. I came this morning from Trikala with difficulty. I passed from the area of Artisanian, which was dangerous. I shouldn't have done it. And now we can't return to Trikala anymore. I'm trying to go to downtown to see if I can save anything. My basement is flooded. This is my whole property. As a result of the subtropical cyclone Yanos, the city of Karditsa suffered the most, where about 5,000 buildings were flooded. The cyclone then moved to Crete. The fire department was called 2,500 times, mainly to people who could not leave their homes by themselves. The Greek Prime Minister will visit the flooded areas and promise state aid for the affected areas as well.
We move to Italy, where a 2-day referendum is held to reduce the number of members of parliament by 50%. At the same time, local elections are being held in 7 out of 20 regions and almost 1,000 towns. Due to the coronavirus, members of the elections commissions resigned from their seats.
In Milan alone, there was a shortage of 100 committee chairmen. The main candidates for these positions were students and young unemployed people who had lost their jobs due to coronavirus. Local elections and a referendum were held 7 months after the first coronavirus infection was detected in Italy. Until tomorrow, the country will also have a constitutional referendum on the issue of reducing the number of members of parliament. Both houses of parliament have already voted to reduce the number of their members from 950 to 600. Surveys show that 70% of Italians will support the reform. The reduction in the number of members of parliament and senators is expected to bring savings of 100 million euros per year, but the independent public expenditure observatory estimates that the savings will not exceed 57 million euros.
This is Flash News and still more to come. It is a unique project on the national and global scale and also on the verge of film and visual arts. Thanks to it, The walls of townhouses turn into a large gallery where movable murals are presented. In other words, the walls of townhouse came alive in Wrocław, Poland.
The night of moving murals in the Nadolje district in Wrocław, those who were thirsty for art could admire almost 100 works of artists from 16 countries on walls of post-war townhouses. 3D animations also emerged for the first time from the darkness. A feast for the eyes also at the Palazzo Roverella in Rovigo in northeastern Italy. People hovering over the roofs of the village huts, flying cows and crowing roosters. This is the whole world of the magical art of one of the most important artists of the 20th century, Marc Chagall. The exhibition was entitled My Russia Would Love Me Too, which, as the granddaughter explains, describes the source of Chagall's inspiration. You can only guess what this Turkish paraglider was inspired by. Hasan Kaval proved that having one's head in the clouds does not have to be just a metaphor. To make it more comfortable, he attached a bed, bedside tables and a lamp to his parachute, and after such preparations, he flew off. He was flying over Alanya on the Turkish Riviera for 15 minutes. The Green Hill Valley Sanctuary in southern Burma is a unique place. It was established many years ago as a shelter for retired elephants. It is a place where animals are surrounded by the feeling of living in a forest. Surrounded also by love and care, they live here till the end of their days. However, the pandemic brought back black clouds over the sanctuary. There is a shortage of tourists who are the main source of income, and the Burmese who are locked in their houses come here also very rarely. Just as beer lovers at this year's Oktoberfest, the famous annual festival of the golden foamy liquid in Munich has a very modest dimension this year. Due to the coronavirus, this event was cancelled officially. Only small groups can meet at venues.
And that's the way you all want to celebrate the upcoming fall time. Thank you very much for tonight. This was Flash News. Stay tuned for more information from tvp.info and see you tomorrow, same time. Good night.